Hello and welcome to another lecture. This one is on loving relationships. For this one we are going to talk about love, the components of love, what goes into it. Then we'll actually talk about some of the theories of love. We'll transition from there into some of the different things with intimacy, as well as problems that people have and how to resolve them. So things relating to communication. And we will finish up talking a little bit about jealousy and marriage. So first, let's talk about the styles of love. So for the styles of love, there are multiple different types of love that we're going to look at. This is even before we get into the theories of love, in which we're going to look at the different styles of love within the theories. But let's first talk about these styles. You've got romantic love, game-playing love, friendship, logical love, possessive excited love, and selfless love. And we're going to have slides for each of these. So let's actually get into those. First, we'll talk about romantic love. Romantic love is classified as possibly lust is one way to look at it. It's very similar to our concept of passion. So when you have this strong desire for someone, that's what we look at when we look at romanticized or romantic love. So one of the quotes here is, "My lover fits my ideal." Basically what this is saying is it's when there's a strong desire or passion present. Another quote is, "My lover and I were attracted to one another immediately." So sometimes when you talk about love at first sight, things like that, it's more of this romantic type. Next we'll look at is gameplay in love. So gameplay in love is almost where the chase is what's important. Not necessarily the end goal, but getting to it. So someone might say, "I get over affairs pretty easily," because they are someone who is searching for people more than they're searching for the commitment. So another quote is, "I keep my lover up in the air about my commitment." So again, game playing love is less about commitment and more about, I guess, the process. So one of the things that we won't talk about as much in these slides is a thing called new relationship energy. So new relationship energy is a period of time at the beginning of relationships, sometimes lasting months, where people feel exhilarated, where people feel almost like a natural high with their partner. So there's this strong desire that goes back to the previous one, but also just a strong attraction that tends to level off over time. People who are interested in game playing love are constantly seeking out that new relationship high. The next is friendship. So friendship is also going to include love. And if we aren't even looking at romantic relationships, if we look at just platonic relationships, you'll have a friendship love there as well. But you can have friendship love within a romantic relationship as well. So friendship love is when there's a strong component of respect or intimacy. And again, this doesn't even have to be romantic intimacy. This can be a type of intimacy where you share secrets or where you share your innermost feelings and thoughts. So this is a loving attachment with a non-sexual affection. Again, there can be that romantic sexual affection there. So you can be in a romantic relationship in which you experience friendship love as well as romantic love. But it's typically defined as the non-sexual love that people have for their close friends. And the quote here is, "The best love grows out of an enduring friendship," which again goes back to what I was saying, where you can have friendship within a romantic context. So that's one of these things when we're looking at these different styles of love, knowing that you can have multiple of them at the same time. The next is logical love. So logical love is more of a practical type of love. So this is the love where you're you're not as much thinking with emotions as you are thinking with logic. Is it smart to be in a relationship with this person? Is it smart to be where you're at in the relationship with this person? That type of thing. So it's, again, you can have multiple different types of love at a time, but this is the type of love where it's much more analytical and practical. So the quotes here are, I consider my lover's potential in life before committing myself. So not just looking at that emotional connection, but also looking at, well, what's their potential? So you've got a good future, that type of thing. Or I consider whether my lover will be a good parent, that type of thing. The next is possessive excited love. So possessive excited love is more passion. So we talked about it a little bit with the first one with romantic love and desire and all that. Well, this is kind of similar in some ways, but this is more of in the moment. So passion is that almost new relationship high that I was talking about, that people get in new relationships, where I get so excited about my lover that I cannot sleep, or when my lover ignores me, I get sick all over. It's this strong connection, but it's not as much of that like romantic desire. It's more of a passion for being with that person, being around that person, as well as having, like the second one says, where you get upset when you're not around them. One thing that passion or possessive excited love leads to, or can potentially lead to, is strong jealousy, which we'll talk about jealousy later. The next type of love is selfless love. So selfless love is going to transition a little bit from these types of, well, passion or desire or logic into selflessness, into generosity and charity. So quotes here, I would do anything I can to help my lover. The type of thing where you're giving up to do something for your partner. Or my lover needs and wishes are more important than my own. And it really comes down to that this is actually a very healthy thing if both people are doing it. So if both partners are giving a lot to their other, then both are also getting. But if only one person is doing this, if one is giving, and the other is just taking, that's where it can turn into a unhealthy type of relationship. Next, we're going to talk about the triangular theory of love, but first let's watch a video on that.
In 1985, Robert Sternberg presented a theory that has piqued the interest of various people, a theory concretizing something that has baffled the minds and wrenched the hearts of many: love. He called it the triangular theory of love, as it's best explained in the form of a triangle, but it's more commonly known as Sternberg's theory of love. In the context of interpersonal relationships, there are three components of love: intimacy, passion, and commitment. According to the theory, intimacy is the feeling of attachment, closeness, and connectedness. Passion, on the other hand, is the fiery depth and intenseness you experience when you like someone, encompassing the drive connected to both romantic and sexual attraction. The third component, commitment, ties the other two together, as it encompasses short-term and long-term decisions to remain with one another and plan for the future. According to Sternberg's theory of love, there are 6 forms of love, which are combinations of the 3 components previously described. 1. Non-love. Non-love is merely the absence of all 3 components. This basically characterizes the majority of our personal relationships, which consists of simple, casual interactions. It could apply to your acquaintances or people you're not particularly attached to. 2. Friendship. Friendship exists when only intimacy is present. This is the set of feelings you experience without the intense passion or commitment of romance. It can, however, be a route for other forms of love to manifest from. 3. Infatuated love. Infatuation occurs when passion is present and both intimacy and commitment is absent. Crushes fall under this category. Solely sexual relationships are also included, as they're only bounded by carnal desires and nothing more. This is the most common root of romantic love, as it's believed that intimacy develops over time, but if neither intimacy nor commitment develops, this type of love can fizzle over time. 4. Empty love. An example of empty love is an unhappy marriage, where intimacy and the flames of passion for your partner is gone. As a strong love deteriorates into empty love, nothing is left but the contract of marriage itself. It's characterized by the absence of intimacy and passion, despite the presence of commitment. Arranged marriages, on the other hand, can start out as empty loves, but can develop into other forms of love over time. 5. Romantic love. Romantic love is a combination of intimacy and passion. Relationships under this category not only involve physical bonds, but emotional bonds as well. This is one of the most common stepping stones to married life. However, it lacks commitment. This type of relationship is easier to dissolve, with no legal issues, if you or your partner have had enough of it. 6. Companionate love. Companionate love is characterized by a combination of intimacy and commitment and the absence of passion. It's stronger than friendship love because of the addition of commitment. It's observed in long-term marriages, where you don't necessarily need passion in order to stay in love with your partner, because affection still remains. Companionate love can also be found among family members and close friends who have strong platonic friendships. 7. Fatuous love. A good example of a fatuous love is when Kim Kardashian married Kris Humphries, only to divorce him 72 days later. It's a whirlwind of romance we usually see on television. Fatuous love is the combination of commitment and passion without intimacy. 8. Consummate love. Consummate love sits at the very center of the triangle, as it's said to be the perfect, ideal type of love. All three components are present in this type of love, and it's the goal for people in relationships. According to Stemberg, couples experiencing consummate love will continue to be sexually intimate years into the relationship, and they can't imagine themselves being happier with other partners. They work through their difficulties and find delight in their relationships. However, Sternberg cautions that maintaining this relationship is harder than achieving it and is not a permanent form of love. With that, do you agree with the types of love that Sternberg proposes? What other factors do you think affect a relationship? Do you think the 6 forms of love are global, or is there a subjective perspective for every couple? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. On a side note, Psych2Go is planning to make some cool merch for you guys, and we're taking suggestions, so let us know if you have any ideas. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our website and other social media, as well as our new Patreon account for more content, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching!
Okay, now that you've watched the video, I'm not going to spend as much time on these slides coming up here because they're basically rephrasing what the video said. I will talk about it a little bit, but I don't need to say exactly again what the video said. So again, there's 3 components of love in the triangular theory of love. There's intimacy. So intimacy is this experience of warmth towards another person that arises from feelings of closeness, bondedness, connectedness. So intimacy is this, as I said, another way to look at it is when you share secrets or your innermost thoughts and desires, that type of thing. So it's a feeling of closeness we have, as well as being willing to open up to those around us. Next is passion. So passion is going to be more of that romantic or sexual desire for another person. You can have passion without sexual desire, but passion is more of typically, it says here, accompanied by physical arousal. Again, doesn't have to be accompanied by physical arousal. There are people who are asexual that still have passion. But passion is more of this intense desire for another person. So it can be either romantic or sexual. And then finally, commitment or decision. This is when you have either short or long term, or a combination of the two, commitment or tie to another person. So where you have decided to remain in that relationship. So you've got these 3 around the outside: the commitment, the intimacy, and the passion. When you have all 3, it's consummate. But let's look at each of those individually one more time. I know the video covered it, that's why I'm going to go through it quickly, but let's look at each of those. So first is non-love. The video didn't really talk about non-love, but non-love is when all three components are absent. So this is going to be most of your personal relationships are of this type. So when we're not talking about romantic or friendships, we're just talking about your relationships with your coworkers, your fellow students, your peers, typically with your teachers. You've got this non-love. So the three components are absent. There is no intimacy, there is no commitment, there's no passion, but you do have a relationship in that you have interactions or regular interactions with them. So our casual acquaintances that don't involve any of the elements of love fall into this. Then we get to liking. So liking is our typical friendships. So it's when there's intimacy only. So it's the loving experience with another person or friendship type of thing in which intimacy is present. So you've got that closeness, that willingness to possibly share secrets, that desire to be around them, but there's no passion, there isn't that desire for sexual or non-sexual closeness. You just want to be with them mainly because of, again, that closeness, that intimacy. So passion and so the next one is infatuation. This is when only passion is present. So it's when you're talking about early on in a relationship, when you have this strong desire to be with them, possibly sexually, possibly not, but you have this strong desire to be with them, but there is no intimacy yet, and there is no commitment as well. Then you have empty love. Empty love is when you only have commitment. So you've got this decision to love each other without intimacy or passion. It could be from various different things. Stagnant relationships that no longer have emotional intimacy, so where people have drifted apart and they kind of just live together, where physical attraction is gone, that type of thing. I have a set of friends and they're married and they stay together for their kids, which is unfortunate, but the point is I would put them in this. They are committed to each other, but they really don't even talk anymore. So there's no emotional component, there's no physical attraction, it's just down to the commitment. They're staying together for the kids. Now we're going to examine if two of the three components are present. So first we'll look at intimacy and passion. So intimacy and passion, romantic love. So this is where there's a physical and emotional attraction to each other, but there isn't yet a commitment. So it could be if you are in the early stages of a relationship where you're still allowed to see other people, you're still just dating, but you've started to develop that, or you have developed that closeness, that intimacy, and there's definitely the passion there. So things like summer romances, where you know at the end of the summer it's going to be over. It's in that case you've got that intimacy, passion, but no commitment. The next is companion love, where intimacy and commitment are present, but there's no passion. So this is where you've got your long-term committed friendships, those friends you've had for years, those friends that you are really close to, but of course there's no sexual component there, or there's no passion. So sometimes you can have this in romantic relationships, in which a marriage in which the passion is faded, people are still together, they're still close friends, but they stop having sex, things like that. Platonic lasting friendships is another one, as I already said, where you have these close friendships, possibly long lasting, but you don't, of course, have a passion for each other. The next one is fatuous love, and that is when you have passion and commitment, but without intimacy. So this is when you have a desire for each other, you've made a commitment to each other, but you really haven't talked or developed the intimacy. Typically in fatuous love, the intimacy develops later, but it doesn't always. And some people, they're just, in people that are more along the lines of, you might call them shallow, where they don't form that intimacy, but they might still make commitments and they might still have passion. Whirlwind courtships, arranged marriages, that type of thing would fall under this if there's that component of passion. And then, of course, there's consummate love. Consummate love is when you've got all three components. So it's the full, complete measure of love. It involves the combination of passion, intimacy, and commitment, and the decision has been made. So you've got that intimacy, that closeness. You've got that passion, that desire for each other, and you've got that commitment or decision to remain together. This is something we strive to achieve, and some of us never achieve this in our lifetimes, and even if we do achieve it, it doesn't necessarily mean that our relationship is going to maintain this. And that's it. Basically, maintaining it actually is even more difficult than achieving it, because you can get all three, but maybe the intimacy fades, or the passion fades, or the commitment fades, that type of thing. The next thing I want to talk about is Rusbult's model of commitment. This is a very interesting model. I added this in. This isn't in your book, and this is a model I used in my dissertation, basically looking at how couples remain committed to each other. And commitment in a relationship is based on three components. First is investment. How much you've invested in the relationship. Investment can be resources, it can be time, it can be children. So how much is invested in the relationship? If you own a house together, you've got more invested. If you have bank accounts that are joint, you've got more invested. Basically, investment in this case looks at how hard would it be to get out of a relationship because of how much you've already put into it. The biggest component of investment is probably time. The longer you're in a relationship, the more you feel committed to it because the more you have invested in it. The next component is quality of alternatives. So this is a kind of an interesting one in that it's quality of alternatives is how good or how easily can you get into another relationship. How good are the alternatives and how easy you can get into a relationship with someone else. So if you are in a small community, and it would be very difficult to get into another relationship, the quality of alternatives would be low. If you're in a large community where there's lots of other options, quality of alternatives is higher. Along those lines, you've also got the component quality is that person, are those alternatives as good or better than your current partner. So if your current partner is someone who maybe for a woman, her partner is someone who's very high status, the quality of alternatives is going to generally be lower because their partner is high status. Same for a guy if their partner is very attractive. So this is one component that goes into it. The lower the quality of alternatives, the more committed you're going to be to your relationship. And the last component is relationship satisfaction. So how satisfied are you with your relationship? This is pretty obvious, pretty self-explanatory, and that is the happier you are with a relationship, the more committed you should be to it. So, and I'm going to try and write on this slide, in this case, commitment is going to be equal to your investment minus any quality of alternatives plus your relationship satisfaction. So the more relationship satisfaction and investment you have, and the lower the quality of alternatives, the more committed you're going to be to your relationship. Whereas the lower investment, the higher quality of alternatives, and the lower relationship satisfaction, the less committed you're going to be. Another way I've seen this explained is typically if any two of the three of these are present, if you've got high investment and high relationship satisfaction, even if there's high quality of alternatives, you're going to tend to stay in your relationship. So if any two are present in a positive way, then you're going to stay in the relationship. But as soon as there's only one left. So high quality of alternatives, low investment, but you've got high relationship satisfaction. You've only got one left, that's relationship satisfaction. Then you tend to leave relationships because there's only one left. Next thing we're going to look at is how a relationship develops. So we've talked about love. We've talked about commitment. We've talked about a theory of love. Now let's look at the path of relationship development. So these are going to be the four main stages of relationship development that people go through: romance, power struggle, stability, and commitment. Now, not everybody goes through these, and not everybody goes through them in the same way, but people tend to, when they're developing relationships, go through these four stages in this order. First is romance. Romance is where we sense our possibilities in the relationship. So where we're starting to see what could be possible with the person we're with. We start to create a shared vision during this time. We start to form this shared attraction. Next is the power struggle. The power struggle is where we now learn to recognize and validate that people in the relationship have differing needs and differing perceptions. So in that passion, that early one where there's that strong component of attraction and people are like starting to see the possible future together and not just a one-night stand. The power struggle is where, okay, now we've seen this possibility of a future. Now let's start looking at what we need to do to get to that future. And the power struggle is where we acknowledge that one member of the couple may have different long-term outcomes than the other, and what is important to the couple, as well as is that something that's going to be a deal breaker, or is that something that's going to allow them to continue. During this time, we learn to say who we are, what we want. Again, during that early passion, it's all about just that early attraction. But during the power struggle, now we're about finding out who we are and who we are as a couple type of thing. And one thing, the power struggle for the relationship to be healthy should be symmetrical, parallel, and complementary. What that basically means is one person shouldn't be giving up everything for the other. If one person's giving up everything for the other, if only one is talking and one is listening, if one person's in charge and the other has no say, then those relationships tend to fail over time. The next portion of the relationship is stability. So stability comes after that conflict, where we take responsibility. We can expand our senses and identity through dialogue with each other. One thing, we didn't talk about identity in this class, but one big component of identity is our identity tends to change over time. Slowly, but it tends to change over time. One of the big things that can change our identity is getting in a romantic relationship. Romantic relationships, we tend to slightly and slowly become more like our partner, and they tend to become slowly more like us. So along those lines, we're during the stability phase, people are forming this relationship in the long term, and they are looking at where responsibility lies, what their identity is, and how their identity is shifting towards their partners. Also, one component of stability is to learn that differences are okay. So yes, you might have a difference in whether how many kids you want. Some differences are not okay, typically. Like whether if one person wants kids and the other doesn't, that tends to cause long-term conflict. But if one person wants 3 kids and one person wants 4, those differences may be okay. That's something that can be resolved in the long term. If one person has a desire to be alone for an hour a day, to have some alone time, but the other person doesn't necessarily like alone time, that's an okay difference. You can, through working through the relationship, you can find ways to accommodate this. Possibly the person who doesn't necessarily like to be alone spends that time going out and hanging out with friends. We learn during this time that we each have our strengths as well as each have our weaknesses. So during this time, we build up this relationship through a combination of the combined strengths. Then the final stage is commitment. So commitment is where we shift from I to we. So we look at ourselves in a relationship as interdependent. We've gone through this conflict. We've resolved our issues of the conflict and had this stability, and now we are making this long-term commitment. So this is a bit different than the commitment we were talking about earlier, because the commitment we talked about earlier could be short-term or long-term. This is commitment in the sense that we are making a long-term commitment, and we now look at ourselves in a relationship as being a whole rather than parts. And one important part of commitment, and this is an important part of relationships as a whole, we learn to live with the impossibility and unsolvable problems. No relationship is going to have problems that are all solvable. Sometimes you will get to unsolvable problems. It's how you deal with them. Sometimes people will take a break from each other for a few hours when they run into things like this. It's then that it differs from one couple to another, but the point is when you've made this commitment, one important component of it is being able to deal with the unsolvable problems that might come up or impossibilities that might occur. Let's look at some problems that can occur in relationships. So one of the main things I'm going to talk about here first is communication. So communication is both good and bad. Communication is one of the biggest factors of strengthening relationships, but miscommunication or communicating wrong can actually be one of the biggest things that causes relationship disillusion. So let's first look at some problems that arise with communication. Like, for instance, the speaker may use words differently than the listener, and this might lead to a misunderstanding. So when a couple is communicating, one member of the couple may say something and the other person may interpret it or misunderstand it as something different. And when that happens, there tends to be an escalation of fights, of hostility, of and a breaking down of relationship satisfaction and commitment. The speaker's words may also not match their tone, voice, facial expression, or body gestures. This tends to happen when people are possibly from different cultures. So people from different cultures will have different facial expressions, body gestures, tone of their voice, things like that, to mean different things. So people who get into relationships with those from different cultural backgrounds, they may run into problems communicating due to those. Now, in the long term, people tend to learn better what their partner is communicating, even if they start with miscommunications. So in the long term, this isn't as big of an issue, but it still can be, because even after years around someone, you could still not pick up on all of the cultural specificities that might exist that person learned as a child that you haven't been able to learn. The next is the speaker may not be able to put into words what they truly mean or feel. This happens quite often, actually. We seem to feel that the English language is really good at expressing, and other languages as well are really good at expressing how we feel or what we mean. But in actuality, it's poor at times. Even right now, I'm having a little bit of difficulty putting into words exactly what I mean, because even if the words are there, expressing them and saying them and bringing them to mind might be difficult. And because of this can cause conflict in couples because of problems of communication when it's not being conveyed how the person is actually meaning it to be conveyed. What can you do, though, to improve communication, to reduce these problems with communication. First of all, be an active listener. So adopt the attitude that you might actually learn something when someone else is talking. When they're talking, don't just say, or don't just think, I know what they're saying, I don't need to listen. No, actively think that you might actually learn something, and that'll make you learn or make you listen closer to what they're saying and pay more attention. When the other person is speaking, show that you understand. Ask questions to help clarify. Possibly after they say something, repeat part of it back to them to make sure that not only are you understanding it, but the person who is communicating knows you're understanding it. Also, try to grasp the meaning of the speaker's words instead of planning your next line. People fall into this trap all the time. Somebody says something, and after they say the first sentence or two out of a 5 or 6 sentences, the person who they're talking to starts thinking up a reply to those first 2 sentences and stops listening to the rest of what the person is saying. Or if they're still listening to it, they're not listening to it as closely. And the final thing, and this goes back to all of this, is just pay attention. Try not to be distracted. Don't be distracted by planning your next thing you're going to say. Don't be distracted by dismissing it. Don't be distracted by anything else that's out there. Pay attention and you will learn better. That is the things for the person listening. How about the person talking? Big component is providing information. Know that your partner can't read your mind. You might think what you're saying is conveying what you mean, but they might not be interpreting it that way. They might be doing everything right with listening and still not picking up on what you're saying. Take an opportunity to tell your partner they've done something right rather than just telling them when they're doing things wrong. So provide information. Providing information in the context, in this case, of when you're looking at, okay, now you've got a communication problem or you're having a fight. Tell your partner what they're doing right as well as what they're doing wrong. Try to stay positive. Try positivity rather than just negativity. When giving criticism, focus on the problem without causing guilt or fear. So if giving criticism, try to give suggestions of ways that can be corrected, or make it clear that you're not criticizing them in such a way that you're bashing on them, but that you're trying to help them. A big component of conflict is ultimatums. It's best to not give ultimatums in the first place, but if you are going to give ultimatums, in some situations ultimatums can be a good or useful tool. If you're going to give them, don't give them unless you're going to follow through with it. Otherwise, everything you say after that is not going to be looked at as being valid because you didn't follow through with the ultimatum you had. The next thing we're going to talk about is jealousy. Jealousy is a very interesting thing. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the semester, and if we have time in the last chapter, I'll talk about it a little bit more. But jealousy is a very interesting component of relationships. That is because there's evidence of jealousy in all cultures. Just about everyone gets jealous. Jealousy isn't something necessarily that we should be trying to avoid or get rid of. Jealousy actually has a reason that it exists, and it has positive connotations to it. However, jealousy can impair a relationship by it producing feelings of mistrust or possessiveness. Jealousy can cause problems in relationships, especially if jealousy is expressed in a hostile or negative way. So one thing I'll say here again, jealousy isn't necessarily bad. What is bad is how you express your jealousy. Sometimes the fear of losing a loved one or anger can cause jealousy. So this is one of the main reasons we have jealousy. And again, it's an important part of jealousy is acknowledging why jealousy exists. So why do we have jealousy? Well, one of the reasons, or one of the main reasons, is a fear of losing a loved one, meaning a fear of the person that we are in a relationship with finding someone else. Jealousy can lead to depression, can lead to spousal abuse, can lead to suicide, it can lead to murder. So there are some pretty negative things associated with jealousy. But again, this is when jealousy goes to the extreme or when it's expressed in a negative way. However, in mild forms, jealousy can reveal how much you care. It can show to your partner that you actually care about them and care about the relationship. If there is no jealousy at all, then some people start to interpret that as not that their partner isn't invested in the relationship because they're not jealous about it, so they must not be afraid of you leaving them for someone else. Now, why can jealousy occur? I already talked about it. It's from this fear of losing your partner. It can also derive from low self-esteem, so those who have low self-esteem tend to experience more jealousy. People who are overly dependent on your partner, if you're overly dependent and then losing your partner, can cause jealousy. So the thought of losing your partner. So this low self-esteem in combination with overly dependent can increase jealousy. A fear that you'll not find another partner if you lose your partner. So this goes back to losing your partner. There is a bit of a gender difference in how jealousy is related to inadequacy. So for women, feelings of inadequacy can lead to feelings of jealousy. So a woman who feels inadequate, that could make her start to feel jealous in the relationship. Whereas men, feelings of jealousy tend to lead to feelings of inadequacy. So once you start feeling jealousy, you might feel inadequate, and it might then lower your self-esteem. So kind of in this, going back to self-esteem, for women, it's lower self-esteem tends to lead to jealousy, whereas men, jealousy can lead to lower self-esteem. And again, one of the big things here is that jealousy isn't, and I've said this a few times, jealousy by itself is not a bad thing. Having jealousy is not a bad thing. It's how you express it. And why exactly are you feeling the jealousy? Are you feeling the jealousy because you're very committed and you fear losing your partner, but there's really no reason to fear it, but you're just so committed and the losing them would really hurt your heart and your feelings? Or are you feeling jealousy because your partner is cheating on you or you're cheating on them, so now you're jealous by proxy? One thing, though, that jealousy can lead to is perceiving anyone as a rival. And again, this goes back to the negative expression of jealousy. Now here's another negative of jealousy. Many people play games. What I mean by this is people will try to make their partner jealous. They'll let their partner know they're attracted to other people. They might flirt with other people. They're doing this in order to possibly get commitment out of their partner, but what's been found in research is eliciting this type of jealousy just tends to be self-destructive in the relationship. Flirting openly with others, as I said, that type of thing. Making up stories to get more attention from the partner in order to inflict pain or take revenge, or to try and get a commitment out of their partner. Next, let's talk about the myths of long-term relationships. And there's just a set of myths here to look at. First, relationships will make you feel complete. This is a myth. For some people, it helps make them feel complete. But if you have a huge feeling of being incomplete while you're not in a relationship, being in a relationship won't necessarily fix that. The next is your partner should change for you if they really love you. This is a myth. As I said, people tend to shift slightly towards their partners, And it is sometimes good that people become more like their partner, but back to that selfless love, if only one person is changing, if only one person is giving, then it's something that can be harmful to the relationship. And if someone is really passionate about something, they shouldn't be expected to change with that thing they're passionate about. That's one of those things you've got to work through in the conflict and the stability stages of love. If you truly love each other, romance should continue. As I already said, quite often romance does decline over time in relationships. In some people, the romance completely goes away, even if the intimacy and commitment are still present. And along those lines, romance is almost like a roller coaster in relationships. It might decline, but it might come back later, and then decline again and come back later. So there's ups and downs. It's not something that is directly related to how much a couple loves each other and how good the romance is. Another component is any differences should always be settled. I already talked about this one. In relationships, you're going to have conflicts that are not going to be solvable. These are times where you have to acknowledge within the relationship that you can't settle those differences. Continually trying to settle something that can't be settled just causes more conflict. In a good relationship, you have identical dreams and goals. As I have already said, dreams and goals are just like identity, tend to become slightly the same over time, but that doesn't mean they need to be identical. People can have different dreams, different goals, different things they desire. A relationship must be stable in order to be healthy. You can have unstable, healthy relationships. That's something that research has shown. Relationship instability due to things like minor conflicts in the relationship, due to things like separation, other things like that. You can still have a healthy relationship that has those. It's only when they become harmful that it becomes unhealthy. Next is, the more you're open with your partner, the more satisfying the relationship will be. There's this tendency that the more open you are, the more intimate you are, the more close the relationship will be, but it isn't necessarily a rule, especially along the rule of it being more satisfying. You might have a closer relationship, but it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be more satisfying. Next, if you are not fulfilled, your relationship must be at fault. Again, this goes back to all these other things we've been talking about. There's so many other things that can leave you from feeling complete or fulfilled. It's not necessarily the relationship. It could be something else like a chemical imbalance. It could be mental health issues. It could be other things like a lack of support from friends. So that doesn't necessarily mean your romantic relationship is at fault. And then the final one, that sexual disinterest is inevitable in a long-term relationship. Counter to things I've said, because in general, desire, passion, that type of thing tends to decline in a relationship. It's not an inevitability. In some people, the sexual disinterest, the passion, the sexual disinterest never happens. The passion and desire never decline. In some people, they stay high throughout the entire relationship. In others, it goes away and doesn't come back. Yet in others, it goes down and back, comes back, goes down and comes back. So the last thing we're going to talk about is marriage. And we're going to look at marriage mainly in America, but we're just looking at marriage in general. So there's some things to note here when we're looking at various different things relating to marriage. First, many young adults are saying now that marriage can wait. So this is a survey that was done in 2010, published in 2013, comparing 2010 to 1960. So 26% of people in 2010 are currently married, 20-somethings are currently married compared to 68%. So we've got that there, that more people are waiting to get married. as well as less people are getting married. So 51% now compared to 72% in 1960 are actually married as adults. Part of this is because people are waiting longer, so in general you're going to have less people married, but you have more people doing things like cohabiting. Yeah, I can't say that right now, but people that are living together rather than just getting married. People that are living in more of a common law type marriage. People who are in step families without marriage. So that will go down to more people are getting divorced today, and along with more people are getting divorced, less people who are divorced as a percentage are getting remarried. There is more remarriages today in general, but that's just because more people are getting divorced. Slightly more people now say marriage is obsolete compared to the past. There's a variety of family arrangements are a good thing. That's gone up slightly. If I can get this right. But marriage for love is what is popular. So 93% of people today say marriage for love, marriage or love is very important in marriage. So love is the number one reason that people have for marriage today. But having children or financial security, that has actually gone down over time. So it's 59% say having children is an important component of marriage, and 31% say financial stability is important. Those numbers are today that it used to be higher. But making a lifelong commitment and having companionship remain important. So reasons for getting married are that lifelong commitment, or for that just to have companionship. So as you see, and it doesn't say it on these slides, but less people are getting married now. Less people are waiting longer to get married. Might be, why is that the case? Well, that's typically the case because people are waiting to get married because of college, of waiting to have a job, waiting for stability. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, stability was much easier to obtain at 22, 23. Now it's taking till 28, 29. So it's one of the big reasons why people are delaying. But in general, just less people are getting married. More people are getting divorced. More people are getting remarried, but a lower percentage of divorced people are getting remarried. But again, love is important for marriage. On this next slide, I've got a couple different graphs here. I put these two different graphs here because it's kind of interesting to see these. And this is how married people met their partner. First thing is that married people met their partner through in 1994. The majority of them is going to be here, and let me change it to white, in here through family members. So 35% were through family members. 32% were self-introductions, and 13% were self-classmate and others. We've got this over here, 15% mutual friends, and then 5% other. However, that has changed since then. So that 35% that was family members before, and 15% that was friends. So that between family and friends was 50% before. Now it's 26%. So that's cut in half. Before, coworkers, classmates, neighbors was 13%. Now it's 36%, almost 3 times higher. And where you've got self-introductions, that is kind of the same in some ways. When we look at now, you've got 11% bars and 17% online. Those both could be combined into looking at these self-introductions. The biggest thing I would say here is, when we look at the left to the right, is that online component. 17% met online. In 1994, you'd probably have less than 0.1% that it will have met online, because the internet was basically just getting started at that point in time. So really big change over time that has occurred in how people meet their partners. Okay, that is the end of this lecture. I'm going to, I split up this lecture from the other lecture with gender and sexuality. I'll get that one recorded right after this and post them both. Come on back.